Hey there, Narrate. Lexi here, just letting you all know that Gay and I plan to host kids ages 6 weeks to 5th grade at Alpha Graphics on Good Friday at the 540 gathering. We will not be hosting kids gatherings at the 1210. However, your children are certainly welcome to join them in that space, and we hope to see you there. Thanks.
Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, some 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them about their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, while Mary stayed at home. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one who has come into the world." When she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary and told her privately, "The teacher is here and is calling for you." And when she heard it, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not come to the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. The Jews who were with her in the house consoling her saw Mary get up quickly and got out. They followed her because they thought she was going to the tomb to weep there. When Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved.
He said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus began to weep. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him?" But some of them said, Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" When Jesus, again greatly disturbed, came to the tomb, it was a cave and a stone was laying against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, already there is a stench because he has been dead for 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone, and Jesus looked upward and said, "Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me." When he said this, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, and his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go."
Thanks, Mikey and Kelsey. Good morning. It's really great to be here with you. If you're new or you're a guest, welcome. We're so glad you're here. We're in the season of Lent. We're going through the Psalms for our series called Ready-Made Prayers. And I don't know about you, I've learned a ton about the Psalms these past few weeks. I really love that they give us language to pray maybe to God and speak to God rather than about him. I love that they give us common language to pray together like we do here on Sunday mornings. I also think it's interesting how they invite us into human experiences or emotions or situations that maybe we've not experienced or not experienced yet, and we can kind of bring that all before God. And so I just love to add to that conversation this morning, and to frame our time together, we're going to ask a couple of questions. The first question is, what about prayer? There's a really neat garden metaphor that kind of, I think, gives us handles to something that can be really mysterious or mystic. Like prayer should be mysterious, but this garden metaphor gives us kind of 4 stages of prayer, so we can think about prayer a little differently maybe. Plus it's spring, we're all thinking about gardens, if you garden, so we'll go through that. And then the second question is, how does Psalm 130 invite us into the journey of bringing our human experiences before God? Just a couple of questions to get us going. So if you're like me, maybe you've been on a journey with the Psalms through this season of Lent. Mine kind of started back in January. In the new year, I switched up my morning quiet time routine, and I started going through the daily lectionary. So if you're familiar with that or not familiar, it's just a Bible reading plan. And there's different readings and psalm readings for like the morning and the evening. I don't do a great job at having my quiet time in the evening. So what I was doing is I was like grouping all of the Psalms and the readings all in the morning. And it was too much. It's just a lot of reading. And so what I did was I was like, well, I'm not really getting a lot out of the Psalms. I'm just going to cut them. We're just not going to read them. 2 weeks later, I started reading Answering God by Eugene Peterson. And it's a book about the Psalms. And in page 3, he says something like, if we'd like to become mature Christians and speak to God better, we cannot bypass the Psalms. I was like, well, that's convenient. You're writing a book about the Psalms as tools for prayer. Of course you're going to say that. And then the very next page, he says this: if we're willfully ignorant of the Psalms, we are not thereby excluded from praying, but we will have to hack our way through formidable country by trial and error with inferior tools. And I know in my book group, we've had a lot of conversations where we've disagreed with Eugene Peterson or agreed, and we're somewhere in the middle. But that quote got me, and it challenged me to add the Psalms back into my morning routine. And if I'm being honest, which I will be honest this morning, I'm not feeling the Psalms. I read them some mornings, and I am so distracted, or my mind wanders, and it's everything I can do to just get through the 1 or 2 Psalms in the morning. One morning I was kind of cranky, I guess. I'm grumbling my way through the Psalms, and I don't know about you, but I've got a gym routine, a fitness routine, and if you've got that, you've probably got a few exercises that you do, but you hate. For me, it's planks. I go to group fitness classes a lot. There's one type of class I love with an instructor I love, but she always makes us do planks, right in the middle of class, and I hate it so much. But I do it for 2 reasons, because 1, social pressure. I'm not going to be that one person that just doesn't do the exercise. And 2, I just know they're good for me. They're good for your core strength, all that. And so I've been viewing the Psalms for the better part of Lent as just the planks of my morning quiet time routine. I just got to grit my teeth and get through these so I can get to Exodus or Matthew or the good stuff, Almost exactly 2 weeks ago, Scott and I got invited to Poetry Out Loud, which, if you're not familiar with Poetry Out Loud, it's a high school poetry competition. One of the students that comes to our house every week for youth group made it to the state level of this competition. And so we showed up Saturday morning right here at Grand Street. There were 14 high school students from all around the state who had memorized and were reciting these poems. And they all did such a good job. If I was 16 or 17 and you'd asked me to memorize and recite poetry in front of a room full of people, I think I would have passed out in terror. They all did such a great job. And there were a couple of things that I started to notice as they were reciting their poems. A lot of them slowed way down and were very intentional with the words that they were saying. They all made really good eye contact and facial expressions. They often used their body or their body language to kind of invite you in or make you feel opposed to something. They were creating this experience. And if I'm being honest, for the first part of this, I was a bit annoyed because I just wanted them to get to the point. I love a good story with a main character, a villain, there's some tension, there's a clear plot line and a conclusion, and I can go about my day. That's the kind of story I like. And that's not what poems are about. Poems invite us into messy, nonlinear human experiences, and we're asked to feel things maybe we'd rather not, or we're invited into experiences we'd rather not be invited into. And most of the way through the competition, I had this light bulb moment, and I went, oh, I think I'm starting to get the Psalms a little bit. Because the Psalms, yes, there's kind of a meta-narrative if you look at the overall story of the book of Psalms. But the Psalms are not these neat, perfectly linear storylines. They invite us into messy, human, raw emotional experiences. And they invite us to kind of present all of this before God. And so what if the Psalms are not about the destination? They're not about getting to some conclusion, but they're about the journey. They're about inviting God into our very human experiences. Teresa of Avila has this quote. We're going to talk about her in a little bit. She says, having gone through so much myself, I'm sorry for those who begin with books alone. For it is extraordinary what a difference there is between understanding a thing and knowing it by experience. And Eugene Peterson writes about this too. In his book, he says something like, to know the Psalms is to pray them, is to experience them. And so we're going to ask a question, okay, what about prayer? How do we think about prayer? I was first introduced to Teresa of Avila when I was in seminary. I was taking a Christian mystics class. It went about as well as you think it did. It was not my favorite class. I don't think I was the instructor's favorite student either. Didn't love it, but I was drawn to Teresa of Avila for a few reasons. So Teresa of Avila is a Christian mystic from Spain. She was alive in the 1500s, and she is known today as a really reputable source of information on contemplative prayer, mental prayer. She has several books about the spiritual journey of the soul towards God. And she's a very interesting, autobiography, a very interesting life story, because in her writing, she's very honest about her struggles, her experiences, and just kind of her doubts and working through some experiences with God. When she was 20, she entered a convent. Shortly after that, she became very ill, paralyzed, very sick. She actually, at one point, the other nuns dug her grave and planned her funeral because they thought she died. So she woke up 5 days later and realized everyone in her life thought she had died. And so it was during these few years of illness that she became really proficient in contemplative prayer or mental prayer. This idea that to be with God or experience God's presence, you didn't need words. You just only needed to focus on his presence. So she has a lot of really good writing about that. And she makes something that sounds a little bit odd, really accessible in her writings. After she recovered from this illness, she didn't pray for 15 years because she didn't feel quite good enough to talk to God. She had this wild conversion experience in her 40s, and then after that, we get kind of all of these really interesting writings on prayer. One of the things that stands out to me is her garden metaphor. I love this metaphor for prayer. So we're thinking about our soul or our spirit as if it were a garden in this instance. So there's 4 stages of prayer, or 4 ways that we can water the garden. The first, remember, she's alive in the 1500s, so hence the interesting references. So the first one is pulling up water from a well. I've never pulled up water from a well. I was reading about it, though, and it sounds like a lot of work. It's very labor-intensive. We have to get the water to the surface of the earth, and then who knows how far we have to carry it to get to the garden, and how many times we need to repeat that. So this first stage is very hard work. It's very labor-intensive. The second way we can water the garden is through a water wheel and buckets. I was thinking about this like a watering can today. Now here at least the water is being brought to the surface for us, but we still have to get our water and these buckets over to our garden. So it's still some work for us. Number 3 is a river or a stream. And here the water is on the surface and it's flowing. And so we just kind of have to channel that river or that stream to where we need it to go. I was thinking the little irrigation things or the little sprinklers you put in your garden. Once you kind of get it set and you get your lines out, unless you clip them with pruning shears, which I've done way more than I should have, you're kind of set, right? You're ready to go. And then the 4th way that we can think about this is, at some point this is not user error, right? Okay. The 4th point is heavy rain. And at this point, there's no effort from us. The garden is just watered with a heavy, steady rain. So how do we think about this in the stages of prayer? The first stage of prayer, it's bringing our water up from the well. It can be really tiresome. Prayer is hard work. It requires discipline. We're accustomed to distractions. I was laughing because when Teresa of Avila is writing this whole first stage of prayer, she writes a ton about distractions and spending hours and hours in solitude and trying to fight distractions and focus. And I thought, oh man, to be human is to be distracted. She didn't even have iPhones or internet. Why was she distracted so much? But to be human is to be distracted. And this stage requires a lot of discipline and hard work. If we're thinking about, let's bring the Psalms in for a different angle, this could be we're praying the Psalms and they just sound unfamiliar, or they're clumsy, or there's scenarios or emotions that we're not familiar with, and it can just feel kind of odd. This is a lot of hard work. The second stage, it's our water wheel and bucket. So this is what she calls the prayer of quiet. And here prayers are slowly beginning to shape us. In this stage, the Psalms might become more familiar, the language becomes a little more familiar, and at this point, we're more likely to have verses or prayers or Psalms kind of pop up in our everyday lives that then shape our behavior and how we show up in the world. And here in this stage, here the soul begins to recollect itself and comes in touch with the supernatural. The third stage of prayer, this is where prayer moves more towards contemplation. We rely less on words or phrases or communication with God in that way, and we rely more on just experiencing God's presence with us. If we're looking at the Psalms, this might be where a short verse or phrase captivates and holds our attention for quite a while. For me, I was thinking about, I love Psalm 46:10. The first part of that verse says, "Be still and know that I am God." And I think when I'm in this phrase, I love to meditate on that verse. And the final stage of prayer is that heavy rain, and she calls this the prayer of union. And there's no words, maybe like no feelings, just this simple awareness of God's presence with us that takes no effort on our part. So there's a couple of things we can notice about these stages of prayer. Notice there's a shift between the first two and the second two phrases or stages. Those first two require a lot of human effort, a lot of work on our part. And then the last two stages, kind of the pendulum shifts more towards God's effort or God's part. And she describes this shift from like doing, the action of being in prayer, to a shift of being, just simply being with God in prayer. And she would argue that through growth, through practicing prayer and solitude, through growth we might better engage in not only the action part of prayer or the doing part of prayer, but the contemplative or being with God side of prayer. And I think this, being reminded of this garden metaphor helped me because I just really have been struggling to kind of get into the Psalms or feel the Psalms, and it feels like it's a lot of hard work. And I went, oh, well, that's just because I'm in stage one. Like, it's no big deal. We'll just show up and keep working hard. And so I love this because I think it kind of helps us wherever we're at or however God might be challenging you. Like this for me just kind of gives handles to prayer, which can just be kind of a wide category of communicating with God that we don't really know how to like put handles on. So that's where this garden metaphor kind of really just helped me think about prayer in a little bit of a different light. Let's take a quick look at Psalm 130. I actually did end up enjoying this psalm. It's a quick psalm, it's 8 verses, and it kind of breaks up into 4 sections really nicely, and there's different things happening in all of these sections. So we're just going to go through, I'll read it, and we've got a few things just to talk about. Oh, out of the depths I cry to you, O Lord. Lord, hear my voice. Let your ears be attentive to the voice of my supplications. The Message translation of this starts out, it says, help, God, I have hit rock bottom. We see this almost demand to be heard by God. And the suffering, like the fact that this psalmist has hit rock bottom is set kind of right up front here. Suffering is set squarely, openly, and passionately before God. It is acknowledged and expressed. It is described and lived. It's not sanitized or cleaned up. Like that raw human emotion is just placed right before God. If you, O Lord, should mark iniquities, Lord, who could stand? But there is forgiveness with you so that you may be revered. I think here, because God forgives, we know he's the God who makes forgiveness a habit. we have a place to stand. And so these first several verses name a couple realities for us. One, that suffering is real, and two, that God is real. And so how do we participate? How do we show up in this reality? I wait for the Lord. My soul waits. And in his word, I hope. My soul waits for the Lord, more than those who watch for morning, more than those who watch for morning. So we notice a few ways to participate. Wait, watch. And I think the psalmist is all right in this psalm with being a watchman because he is confident in who God is. He has hope that God is going to show up when he said he's going to show up, and he's going to do what he said he's going to do. And so we see this psalm that started from a place of rock bottom or suffering or hardship. We see this psalm moving towards an ending from a place of hope. O Israel, hope in the Lord, for with the Lord there is steadfast love, and with him great power to redeem. It is he who will redeem Israel from all its iniquities. I was trying to sum up this psalm in my own words, and I couldn't say it better than Eugene Peterson. So I've got a long quote to kind of sum this up, but I think it's worth kind of going through this together. We find in Psalm 130, not so much as a trace of those things that are so common among us, which rob us of our humanity when we suffer and make the pain so much more terrible to bear. There are no glib, smart answers. There are no lectures on misfortunes in which we are hauled into a classroom and given graduate courses in suffering. There are no hasty Band-Aid treatments covering up our trouble so that the rest of society does not have to look at it. Neither prophets, nor priests, nor psalmists offer quick cures for the suffering. We don't find any of them telling us to take a vacation, use this drug, or get a hobby. There's none of that. The suffering is held up and proclaimed and prayed. So how do the Psalms invite us into the journey of bringing our human experiences before God? I think this morning, I'm going to give us just in a second or two, about 30 seconds to just kind of sit before God. We've talked about a lot this morning. We talked about the 4 stages of prayer. And I like that because I think that it offers us a place to kind of identify where we might be. Which stage of prayer do you mostly identify with? Which stage do you feel most comfortable in? And where might God be challenging you to grow? And then we've gone through Psalm 130, this psalm where suffering is held up just raw and real right in front of God. There's no need to sanitize or clean up. God desires to just have us present ourselves how we are before him. We can invite God into those very real human experiences. And so I invite you, just close your eyes. I'm going to give you 30 seconds. You can think about any of those things or bring whatever you need to before God. And then in 30 seconds, I will just pray, and then Adam's going to come up and we'll go through communion together. So. God, we thank you that you are a God who desires to be with us in our very real human emotions or experiences. Thank you for the Psalms that provide words for us when we're not sure what to say or maybe not even sure what we're feeling. Thanks that you just desire to be with us and that you love us just as we are. We love you. Amen.
If you'd like to learn more about Narrate Church, find us online at narratechurch.org.
You can also look us up on Facebook or Instagram. Thanks for listening.